Hi.
You.
Do you hear me?
Yes. Yeah. Can you hear us? Hello.
Yes, I think so.
Okay. Great. Okay. Thank you. Great. Well, thank you, Paloma, for being here with us today. Welcome everyone that was able to assist. To come. So first, well, yes, please, Joaquin will be giving the introduction of the event, and we will be able to start. So, yeah.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Welcome. I'm very pleased to introduce Paloma Acosta, who's a climate activist from Brasilia. She completed her bachelor's in law at the University of Brasilia and is currently completing her study in social science at the same university. She's a youth advisor. There's going to be a long list of really impressive things that I'm about to do. She's a youth advisor to the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres, as a part of the UN Secretary General's Youth Advisory Group on Climate Change. She is a legal advisor at Instituto Socioambiental, covering social and environmental rights issues, including climate change, as well as indigenous and traditional people's rights. At Instituto Socioambiental Paloma is responsible for representing the youth perspective. In her work there, she supported the delivery of the first climate litigation action of Brazil. She's also a researcher at the Juridical Clinic of Human Rights, specifically a juridical officer for ethnic and cultural diversity. Furthermore, Paloma is a member of the Feminist Action Coalition for Climate Justice at UN Women, a youth advisor at UN Global Compact Brazil, a member of the advisory committee of UN Conscious Fashion and Lifestyle Network, and an advisor at the Women's Network of the EU LAC Foundation. She was also appointed as one of the 20 most influential women in Brazil by UOL. And in 2020, she was appointed as one of the 100 most influential Latinos tackling climate change issues by such women. So again, very happy to have Paloma Acosta with us today.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for the introduction. I think it says even more than I am already in what I am. But yes, my name is Paloma Acosta. I am based here in Brasilia, Brazil. And I started my activism and I've been doing all of my work based here. Brasilia is the basis of the Brazilian government. So I will not say privilege because it was not exactly a privilege, but I've been seeing how the last administration and now the new administration of Brazil, how they've been working from very close. And I think like in these past years, it was a moment for learning a lot and resisting a lot as well. My activism, it started in ISA, in Instituto Socioambiental, which is like, it is an organization that's been working in the past 20 years with indigenous and traditional communities' rights. And I was part, and I am still part of the law and policy program. So my job was to, and has been to take a look into bills, into law projects that were being discussed even in the Congress, in the Supreme Court, and so on, and provide an analysis that relates with human rights, with environmental rights in Brazil, and constitutional rights. And of course, these last 4 years that now we are changing everything, they've been very defined because it was like if all the time we had to stop fires all across Brazil, in the Congress mostly, and I think like nowadays that we changed our administration, but we still hope to see much major changes. I think right now it is a moment not of relief, but to dream again. That makes possible for us to dream. And I remember when I was working in ISA, and I started reading some technical reviews around the importance of indigenous territories for taking care of the climate. And it was at this moment that I realized it. You know what? Like, if this is something so important for us to care, and if climate is reaching this tipping point, this collapsing mood, what should we actually be doing? And this was the moment when I started like searching all around and trying to find out what I could do. Because if the problem was that big, how it could be and how it was supposed to be the things that we should do. And at this point, it was around 2016 when I discovered about Engajamundo, which is a youth-led organization. It is the biggest one here in Brazil. And we've been working with empowering young people from the past 11 years for young people to have the tools and to have an environment where we could actually participate in decision making spaces together with decision makers, but also in a sense on empowerment, you know, where you can really believe yourself that it's something that you can really participate. And in 2018, I became the climate coordinator of the working group on climate of Engajamundo. And I think that's where the action actually started, because at this point, I was coordinator for 2 years. And at this point, I was engaging daily with 200 young people from Brazil who were actually very interested in climate issues, what they could do. So every week we did online meetings where we were discussing around campaigns, how to participate at COP, how to participate, for example, within the environmental minister, what were the things that we could actually do. And this was very lightning because it was the moment that I had and I actually saw the power of young people. Because imagine, like, every week with work, with studies, with all the things that everyone has to do, you also put it like 3 hours meeting with different young people just to talk about what we could do. And we were not even all from the same place. As you all know, like, Brazil is super big, so we had people from different parts. And it was inside this working group that we started, for example, Fridays for Future Brazil, and we started the strikes in Brazil, and we've been evolving in different strategies on the past years. I think, like, and I remember in the beginning, like in 2019, when all the strikes popped up, that people were really actually not very happy, like, with Brazil, because as we have like a high number of people here, and people were imagining like, why you don't have so many people on the streets. And I remember it was a moment of exchanging of knowledge, because it was then that actually people realized that for us it was not easy to do a big strike, because every it seems like every day we had to strike on something. And especially on 2019, that was the first year of Bolsonaro's government, we had to go to the streets every day because things were changing so fast. We were losing our scholarships, prices were getting higher. So I remember, like, I had to explain to people, like, I mean, climate for me, it's my main one issue. That's why I'm on the streets for that. But when I am on the streets for climate, maybe someday I have to miss a strike for education, because, and even though things are related, we were still in a process of coordinating agendas. And I think like in countries like Brazil, we have so many fires and so many difficulties to fight together that it's hard actually to mobilize people in agendas like environment and indigenous people's rights and so on. But I was very proud on the movement that we did, because we, even though people could not see numbers, we could see in actually people involved, mobilized day by day. We could see how we reached on all the states of Brazil, and also like how people in territories and communities were starting to mobilize themselves and to learn and to understand that there was no way out if you do not fight for climate as well. And I think like right now, to see a government that has for the first time a climate secretary, and that was related with philanthropy, that was someone that was an active part of civil society and fought with us in these past years. I think it is also a result of the movement that young people led here, because we've been pushing hard, we've been speaking loud, and we did not even took only the streets, but we also started becoming advisors in international entities like United Nations. We raised our voices. I myself, I participated in the opening of the Climate Action Summit. Not everyone remember, because together with me was Greta, and she was doing that famous speech of "How dare you?" But I was there saying to everyone what was happening in Brazil. And some years after, we were able to put Chai there to represent us, and she was able to speak what was actually happening in indigenous territory. And even though before the pandemic, I remember I had the chance as to represent the youth activism and climate in the UN Human Rights Council, and I was accompanied by no one less than Davi Yanomami, which is the big shaman and leader from the Yanomami people, and he was there in 2020 to denounce the major invasions of illegal minings in his territory, and he could not speak because it was the time we all realized what does it mean COVID-19 and so on, and we had to come back from Swiss to Brazil. And the situation now is what you are seeing now in the news, that people are starving. We have over 20,000 illegal miners there. The disinstruction of the territories is starting just now with Lula's administration, but you can imagine how much it was the destruction and how difficult it has been for these people to leave these areas. And I believe like in the spirit, young people were also very relevant in showing like in creative ways, like with social media strategies, with campaigns, with putting attention on issues like this, but also others that we don't talk too much, like climate anxiety and so on. And we've been very I think we reforestate like different minds around that, because we were actually like dedicating ourselves daily to make things change. And we processed government, and hopefully like our action, we will go to a win right now. And we've been trying so hard, like day by day, with different young people, to one by one we mobilize it. And even though we understood and we know that for us to take serious climate action, we have to start locally. And every day I think we were developing more tools and more understanding on the power we have by working multilaterally and by working with different young people from across the globe. And I think like even though we look at COPs, for example, when we don't see the actual results we were looking for, um, for us at least it became a moment for us to work um, as as a big network. And every day more I see young people building strategies how decision makers should be doing, right? Like in Latin America last year, we were able to do our first youth climate summit, and it's called the Regional Conference of Youth. And it was something that we've been dreaming for the past like years, and we were not being able to make it happen. And after that it was so beautiful to see how these young people who participated at it became change makers, were supporting different delegations from Latin America and in different spaces like the ocean conference that just happened, the last COP, and so on. So I think like if we ever lose hope, we can always build back and find it in our communities and with affection. Because even though we don't see decisions and decision makers changing the way and in the like as fast as they need it, um, we see our communities becoming even more empowered, even more capable of finding resources and alternatives. And for me, this already says a lot because um, it is more people resilient and more people who will try to keep reforestating minds. Thank you.
Paloma, can you hear me, Paloma?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. So thank you. Bem-vinda à LSE.
Obrigada.
So it was a perfect speech. I think before throwing it to the floor, I have some considerations to make too. First and foremost, it's interesting that you pointed to every debate that we had every day during the last 4 years or 4 or 5 years in Brazil, and how hard it was to organize any type of protests and strikes because we had so many issues going on in different sectors of society. And today actually marks the 5 years of the killing of Marielle Franco, which was a politician activist in Brazil, in Rio. And we still don't have the answer to who ordered her killing. So I wanted to make this very clear here before we go into the discussion, is that we have 5 years of the day which democracy, well, one of the days where democracy was very challenged in Brazil. But my question here is, in regards to that, how do you see this new government or this new change in Brazil specifically, and we'll go into your work with the UN later on too. But in Brazil, how is it for the environmental activists and the youth to have at least hope that something is being looked at in terms of the government in place? How do you see this as beneficial, for example, for the organization of maybe future strikes or activism in general in Brazil?
Okay. Okay. Taking a look on how it is like right now with the Brazilian government, I think like we were able to rebuild back different structures that were needed for the environmental governance to work on, right? And we also had during the process of transition a strong youth secretary that had been support Lula's government in the transition, but also right now in different activities. But if I can be honest, like it's really hard because, and as we were discussing previously, there are so many agendas we have to take care on: health for young people, education, transportation, and so on. And I feel like sometimes the environmental agenda, it has to come in second, not because it's not urgent, but because some things like having access to food and eating and living properly sometimes overcome like taking care of the environment that we live in. And I feel like, to be very honest, we were at the beginning a little bit disappointed with the administration and how open they were for listening young people. But we've been finding spaces, we've been patient to understand that also a process of transition in a moment where we lost democracy and we are building back democracy, it also takes time. And I believe like when you have the chance to engage with decision makers and bring up a little bit on the ambition that young people they've been discussing on ground, and this I say with very much respect, because if you look at, we are all young activists that also work like in the territories, that work in the front uh, lines, and that is studying, that is working. So I feel like we can connect different words and bring back these different views. And I feel like when we have the chance to engage with decision makers that most of the time are based here in Brasilia as well, but not connected most of their time with people actually in the front lines of climate solutions in the territories and so on, it is when we do the major difference, because then we bring a sense of view, a sense of changing, a sense of priority that sometimes it's different. And I remember this was a learning process for me as well, because even working with young people, you understand that what is a priority for the young groups here based in Brasilia, it's definitely not the same priority when you start engaging with the young people based in Peixoto, next and very close to their territories in Mato Grosso. So I think that's the difference, and that's the power, because we bring like on our views without so many things attached. We don't represent actually nothing but our views and our work. So we are not attached to anything. And we are bold enough to say like what we've been doing and how things can be done. And we honestly are very cheap. This is something I realized, like how cheap it is to work with and for young people.
Perfect, thank you. I just want to see if there's any other question. Okay. Paloma, we'll have a question here. Please let me know if you cannot hear the question, but let's try.
Hi, Paloma, can you hear me?
Sim.
Alan here. Very nice to see you here. It's a pleasure to hear from you. Paloma, I would like to ask you your opinion about our new Ministry of Indigenous People in Brazil. How is it going? And how is Instituto Socioambiental working with this new ministry? And the difference between the last government, like how is the difference between ISA work now?
Thank you, Ala. So I think it was really a moment of achievement, right, for us to have like an indigenous minister. This was not something that we had. It is the first time, and I think it was very powerful to be a indigenous woman as well, someone like Sonia Guachachara, who was the head of APIB. APIB is the Brazilian Association of Indigenous People, if I might translate like this. And she was one of the heads and the leaders that been working in the front of the indigenous movement during Bolsonaro's administration. Her and myself, Chais, Taiwanese, everyone, every environmental leader and defender who spoke up, we were targeted by our own government. And our work was very challenging, if I might say like this. And it was a thing of life threats and like this. And this also come to my organization where I work with. I think in ISA we had to be extra careful in the past years because we were being targeted as uh, as an organization that was against the government. I remember when Bolsonaro's government went to COP and they brought a BIM, which is the National Intelligence Agency, and they put all of us who were participating in COP as part of a list of terrorists. And I remember I kept thinking, because I knew my name was there, like, what does this mean? Like, how am I a terrorist? And I was thinking my day to day, like walking on my bicycle, thinking on signs to go to the street and talk about climate, and how does this makes me a terrorist? And the narrative was so strong on saying that NGOs, environmental defenders, we were working for it seems like an external interest from I don't know who, and that we were receiving international money to do I don't know what, maybe privatize the Amazon as they were doing their way. Um, and I remember it was the very moment of affection to see and to unite with leaders like Sonia, that now is our indigenous minister. And I am very proud to see her there. And as for my work with FISA, we had to work in the past 4 years, basically day by day, stopping fires, and in a most careful way than our brigadistas friends that were arrested, also targeted as terrorists trying to burn out the Amazon, even though they were fire defenders, but okay. And right now we changed very deeply the way we are working, because right now we do have an environmental minister. We are having back the CONAMA, which is the environmental council, sorry. And we are having different environmental structures being built back. We have the Amazon Fund working again, and so on. And I think like right now it will be a moment where we will be able to dream more, and I don't know, like don't stop so many fires. But we have to be realistic, right? Even though we changed the administration, like the president, we didn't change it a lot in the Congress. So we still have a Congress that is major, I don't know, attached to some values that doesn't always relate with protecting human rights and protecting our environmental law. So even though the work changed, it will still be challenging to work with the Congress and to support and stop bills to come over, and like the discussions around pesticides, for example, in Brazil. This will be a big fight. And yeah, but at least now we have somehow a structure that can support us in our daily work.
Thank you, Paloma. there another question? Yes, please.
Hi, Paloma. Thank you so much. I don't know if you can hear me. Nice to see you. I wanted to ask you, you spend a lot of time living and working within the Amazon rainforest, and then also a lot of time in these international forums communicating your experience and what's going on the ground to people who have maybe never been there, will never go there, spend their life in Berlin or London or Washington, D.C., and then make policy from there. And a lot of conversations around the environment right now are about how to make it palatable and attractive and monetizable for governments or financial institutions to help in some way. So I'm wondering how you find a way to bridge the gap between what's actually going on the ground and communicating sort of the theory of change to organizations that are just so very far away from the reality of the Amazon.
Thank you for your question. I think having access to funding and to implementing projects and initiatives and so on, it was something that we realized that how challenging it was for us, and how we had to find alternatives. I am launching a youth climate justice fund together with a friend that was also a student at LSE, and hopefully you'll hear about it in a bit. But I also believe in this other way, coming out for a little bit from the idea that we had, is that people are all the time trying to bring financial and money solutions to problems that are actually on ground. And when you think back, and in this work that I was privileged to do, to travel from places that people probably will never go, and to also connect this with agendas, for example, in New York at the UN headquarters and so on, it was something that teaches me that there is a basic that is needed, and it's something that human society already realized it somehow when we were building back our human rights, what is necessary for us to live in. But the problem is that these access, these rights, they are not given equally on the different parts of where you are. And imagine if everyone had access to a quality air, to education, to food, and to the basic of living. This will actually make huge differences. And I think the money, it comes because of that. And the idea, for example, for us to building a youth climate justice fund is to facilitate, as we've been working on ground, how to track this money that comes, for example, from people that are millionaires and don't actually know what to do with so much money, how this can come directly for my friend, for example, Mitan, that is based in Pará, that has been resisting, that has been forming his young people. And I think the process of reforestating people's mind around it, about the need of, and this is a question I ask myself all the time: should the revolution be funded, right? It is something that at some point I don't know, people, even though they are not connected, there is also too much bureaucracy involved for this money to reach. And I feel like even when we say, for example, in a COP, that we are going to build a forest fund to protect against deforestation and so on, how does this forest fund really achieve and come to, for example, young people that are defending their territories with their own bodies as a target? So I don't know. I think it has been a difficult job, but I think at some point people actually, they could see my trajectory and see that if someone had the chance to connect these different words, it was something that could be done. And that's how I was able as well to open door for my friends to speak for themselves, because I never thought it was my place to say, like, for example, what is happening in a territory, what is happening in the Amazon. Because even though I travel there constantly and I am connected constantly with my friends there, this is not where I live. And it's not my place to say things that relate to others' lives. Everyone should have to say for themselves and for what is happening to their lives. And for me, it was to say more about my journey and how it's been and how it can connect, and how and what are the solutions that we found out together. Like my friends there, what they were needing, and me here understanding, like, okay, but the world was like this, and what can we do? And I think that's how.
Is there any other question? Or if not, I have a question. Okay, so Paloma, maybe we're almost heading to the end, but a question that I wanted to ask you, coming and maybe to contribute to other countries as well from Latin America, is to understand, also with your work at the UN with Antonio Guterres, how can different countries and institutions in South America, in Latin America, organize themselves and work together, both to save the Amazon rainforest, which is a clear objective right now, but also to become the center of the debate on climate change in the world. Do you maybe have an idea on that and how we can use Latin America to be this center?
Yeah, to be honest, like, I believe Latin America, we had like a great potential to be leading climate action, right? Um, Even though it was not only in Brazil, but in different countries that we were seeing how democracy was being deprived, how it was being hurted in different places, and how as well in Latin America we've been seeing and these lapse of democracy getting built back again in Chile, in Colombia, in different parts of our big territory, Latin America. I think this gives us again a chance to work together. I think like Brazil is a country that is so big in the territory and has so much economical power, that I believe that right now, hopefully with a president that actually wants to engage with with the countries that make a frontier with us, maybe it will be a moment where we will be able to bring back um, a jointly perspective in our Latin America community. And I also think like somehow, like, what I've been learning with young people is how we learn it to become a delegation, a group, a community. Because I think like when it comes to Latin America, even in participating, for example, in conference, UN conferences and so on, uh, we were actually for a long time very separated, and we could not like engage together. We had so many different agendas in our realities that at some point it was difficult for us to work together. But at the first opportunity we had to engage, then it is beautiful to see how the delegation of Latin America is so united. We are all the time together, we are all the time thinking together. When we say like in Guatemala is happening this deep sea mining thing, we all go together to talk about it. And I think this is very powerful. And I hope like with changing um, the different governments as we change it here in Latin America, we have a chance to work back again. Soon we will have a COP in Brazil. We will have the presidents of the G20. So I think now it's the time to Latin America to really show what we can have and how we can lead climate action across the globe.
Great, thank you, Paloma. So I think we're coming to an end, actually. I would like once again to thank you, Paloma. It was a pleasure hearing you. It was a pleasure having you here. It's our first edition of the Latin America Summit, only our second day, so it's great to bring these debates here to LSE, to London, to students that are here. We still have a lot to work, and it was great. It gave us a lot of hope hearing you too. So once again, thank you. Muito obrigado. I don't know if you want to speak, maybe some closing remarks, or if you want to say something. Yes, please.
Sure, sure. No, I just want to thank you all for building back this. When I saw about the Latin American Summit, I was very excited because I think this was an initiative, of course, from the Latin American students. So I really congrats all of you, because I think like doing this, you are also doing a way where our entire region can work together. You are uniting, you are reforestating, and bring these discussions to more and more students. So I'm very proud to see this. I'm very proud to keep working with all of you. If you ever need something, just reach me on social medias, PCO Paloma. And yeah, hopefully when I can go to London again, we have a chance to meet in person and we don't have these internet issues and so on. And yeah, let's keep working together for stating minds and putting Latin America as the leader of climate action, because we do have the potential for it.
Perfect, thank you. So please help me thank you.
Amazing.
It was truly an honor to have you here. And thank you everyone who came too. Hopefully you had a great time.
Thank you. It was an honor. Ciao, ciao.
Ciao.